Hi, everyone. In this video, I go over the purpose and the outline of the claim of fact essay. So, beginning an essay sometimes can be the most painful part of the entire process because everybody's probably told you start with a hook, make sure you draw your readers in. And that's hard to do if you don't necessarily know how you're going to develop your essay yet. So a lot of times I make sure I know what my claim is, what I want to prove, and I start there and then I go back and write the introduction. But the goal of the introduction is to pique the reader's attention. And that engaging statement should be something that's more of an immediate thing that's happening, a current issue or statistic or something that draws people into, not only what the purpose of this essay will be, but also it starts them thinking. And don't use truisms to do this. Often it's easy to fall into the kind of statement like technology is ever changing or everyone has a cell phone. These are the things that we don't need that information. You're winding up to the pitch. So if you need to write down a few of those statements to get them out, do so. But go back and make sure that introduction just moves, the reader just gets their attention and jumps right into the purpose because you don't have a lot of time or space to write this essay. Now, a good thing to think about is how you could give readers a sense of even how others are discussing this topic, if that helps you kind of give some more context. But the purpose of the introduction is really to make sure that your reader knows what's about to happen. And it all comes down to organizing it in a way where there is this roadmap that's offered at the end that makes a promise to the reader as to what this paper's goal is. And at the end of your introduction, you will insert your claim of fact. So it will be an argumentative claim because a claim of fact is an argument until you prove it is true. Okay, so if someone could say, prove it, then you know you're arguing. Of course, it's not necessarily the most controversial type of argument, but that's okay. So you want to make sure that this claim of fact states what this paper will be arguing, and it is not anything that has to do with value. Nothing is good, nothing is bad in this, nothing is safe or unsafe. Make sure all those words you're using are not subjective and that people can agree what they mean without explaining what those words, how those words differ to all audience members. Just keep it straight up objective. But what you don't want to do in turn is state what the essay will be doing. So in this essay, I will. Do not do that. Have a more organic thesis statement. Now, when you do put your information together, you want to make sure each body paragraph has a style that is consistent. And a good way to look at this is thinking about I need a topic sentence, I need an example from my research, I need to know how to analyze that research, and then I need to know how to transition into my next body paragraph. Now, if you made your research outline, you should already have like a natural understanding of how your essay needs to transition through those questions that you're asking in your outline. So you might already have a structure that's available to you. If not, and you're wondering what goes here, what goes there, write your body paragraphs, and then you can go back and arrange them how you see fit. So, in your body paragraphs, though, you want to start with a clear argumentative topic sentence that previews the content of the paragraph within the context of the claim of fact. So, topic sentences have an argument. It's kind of like a mini piece of the thesis. How are you going to get us to this final understanding? So, the topic sentence is you, it's your voice. Don't start with the quotation from an expert. If you do that, then you're already deviating from the fact that you've promised us you're going to take us through this evidence and make a claim. So if you start with a quotation, you're already removing the author's investment from the topic in the paper. And um, you want to then provide evidence that backs up your topic sentence. Once you do that, you insert a quotation from your source, you paraphrase from your source, however you want to insert that information, then you have to analyze it. Now, the analysis, the purpose of analyzing the evidence you provide is to give it a so what. Okay, so here's this fact, here's this statistic or survey or whatever. Well, why does it matter? So then you get to go back and talk about how that data is significant based on your claim. How does this all come together? And then you build a transition between the paragraph, the previous paragraph to the next. And that transition can sometimes be a little tricky to figure out right away how you want to bridge the gap. So what I do sometimes is just move on to my next paragraph and then go back later and see how I could build a stronger bridge. Now, development and unity. So making sure that everything is organized and logical is a huge, huge part of being a successful writer. Now, paragraphs that they don't necessarily have to all be the same size, but they should have the same style. And that gives your document more accessibility because then the readers can predict, like, oh, it's organized this way, so it must be doing this thing. And walls of text, where sometimes I read student essays and there's just 2 pages of writing and there's no break. Those walls of text are inaccessible, and it's really hard to get in and pull the details out. And yes, I understand sometimes the evidence you are using needs to be in there, and maybe it makes the paper lengthy. But if you only have 4 pages, you really need to be picking out the gems in your evidence and don't dump everything in. Make sure your quotations or any kind of data you're using does not usurp the page. Okay, so keep that in mind. Be concise and stick to making sure your paragraphs are impactful. And then make sure that you, again, analyze the evidence, relate the evidence to the paragraph's topic sentence. But most importantly, in this development, do not make any value claims. So whether it is a really cool thing or a really scary thing, leave that up to the reader to interpret. Because, when you read about and listened to the video about ethos, pathos, logos, of course, a claim of fact can be kind of dry in some ways, but just by telling someone that these are the results of a test, or here's the amount of people who do this, it evokes emotion in the reader because they then interpret that fact based on their values, like how it is they see the world. So you don't have to do that part. It's already happening. You can talk about what something means in our next assignment. Now you're going to probably, well, you'll have to do one of these things. You're most likely going to have to define a term, provide any kind of background information. You might need to actually discuss how something works, and you need to make sure that you're writing all of your material for your audience. Now we're going for, with definitions, we're going for parenthetical style. So you might use a term, and then right after that term in parentheses, you define it so that you can engage with a wide audience. And your goal isn't to keep your vocabulary so specialist, like in a specialist realm, where not a lot of people would be able to engage with this. So I don't know the level of formalities that you've been taught in previous classes, but it's okay for you to slow down and make sure everybody's literally on the same page. And consider writing this for someone like outside of the circle, or outside of the context that you understand this, um, and I'm not saying, that, and never say this, never ever say you need to dumb something down. Why? Because that's unethical. We don't remove information. What you do is you translate it. And you'll have to do this if you are in a major and end up in a career that's based in anything STEM, or really pretty much anything. You're going to have to translate information for people who are not a part of your community. Now, I guess for this, I mean, I know we don't meet in class and you don't necessarily have an extensive understanding of my perception of the world, but generally, scientific papers or data or things that are just out of my range, not in my wheelhouse, I have to search for a separate source that explains to me what the heck is this? And so I want you to think about yourself kind of like a doctor. Um, if you were diagnosed with something, they wouldn't come in and read the medical journal to you. They would break it down in a way where you would understand. And they're not eliminating or omitting information, they're just changing the way that the recipient receives it. So, if you need to include any separate information that you think would be more helpful for your audience, you can put in links to videos that explain things. I mean, you can get really creative with this, but in general, what's most important is to make sure that we all understand. Math equations, no. Okay. If you've got to use data that's displayed in a way where five people understand it, then you got to move on, or you need to translate that. Okay, use of evidence. Now, the evidence, you have a lot of research. Hopefully, that's working out for you, but you want to make sure you put that within a proper framework. So, like I said in the paragraphs, don't begin your body paragraphs with quotations from sources. You want to make sure you have that topic sentence, and then you're framing where your evidence comes in. So there's a couple of ways on this slideshow. I say, use signal phrases to introduce outside sources, regardless of whether the information will be presented in a quotation, a paraphrase, or a summary. So you want to make sure that when it's appropriate, when it really makes your source stand out and have the most credibility, that's when it is a good idea to slow down and say, according to Dr. XYZ, who is the lead researcher at this university, and then you give the claim or the paraphrased information. When a source is incredibly important for your audience to understand the credibility of and why you used it, use the signal phrase. Now, don't do it all the time though, because then that would get crazy and your whole paper would just be signal phrases. Make sure you do it when it's needed. Otherwise, you can paraphrase or put in quotations, but you have to make it really clear where that source, or what that source is in your parenthetical in-text citation. And then if you only use one source per paragraph, that's fine. In this bulleted information, I have that up there, but realizing that the paper is as concise as it is, that's okay. But it is a good idea to have your sources complement each other. So if you can do that, that's fine, but I understand if you don't. Um, you know, when you are part of the conversation with the research, it just provides a dynamic experience. And so, really consider when you're using your evidence why this is the best evidence. Okay, so mechanics, grammar, punctuation, and spelling, that must be correct. I mean, I know right? That seems easy, but sometimes spell check betrays you. So just always go back and read your essay out loud. And if you notice something just doesn't sound right, well, then go back and pay attention to that. And that's how I catch my errors, is if I read it out loud how I intended it to sound to the reader, then I realize, oh my gosh, this sentence is not working. And then I can rework that. You also catch spelling errors that way. And then the structure, you need to have that be grammatically and syntactically correct. In this level of writing, English 147, I mean, some of you might be coming in from AP or another writing course. You may have had training, in some ways. But if you do struggle with grammar, there's a ton of help available to you. And one of those places is the Writing and Rhetoric Center or the Learning Center. And I encourage you to make an appointment with a tutor should you need to. You can also just email me, ask me questions, come to office hour. But MLA format, in the time when AI can write anything, um, what I notice is that the use of in-text citations and then, how those are used in tandem with the MLA works cited, one of the biggest red flags for me where something either was an accident or something is wrong is when those in-text citations do not match up with the sources that were used in the work cited. So my big challenge to my students is making sure, right, that you understand how to cite everything properly. Because if you're not an expert in a topic and you're coming at an external audience who's, has a wide range of knowledge, if someone doesn't know where you have something from or where it came from, you immediately lose credibility. So never do things like studies show, a report I read said this. Always be ready to explain what it is. But having those in-text citations and matching them up with your works cited list is a huge deal. So please make sure you go back and that all of those things are working. And there are multiple videos up there for you about MLA format. So again, should you run into any trouble there, reach out to me. And then style. So the style of your writing, you should try to vary your style. Now, I know there's time constraints and you can't put this aside for 2 weeks and come back to it. But here's a couple of tips. Do not start sentences with this. And if you do, you have to explain what this is. That is something I've noticed where a pattern gets set up. And then sentences, they just become slightly monotonous. And so go back and look, am I starting my sentence with just nouns or pronouns over and over again? And if you are, think about how you could vary your style. Look, can I start a sentence with a verb? Can I combine ideas because things are repetitive? So repetition and monotonous structure of sentence style is I'll point that out when I look at your essay, but I want you to push yourself and make this, use different punctuation. I mean, get over your fear of the semicolon. I don't know, but you can definitely have a personality through style. And then you can definitely use a visual for this. I've had students have great success by finding an image that explains something or provides data or backs up a claim. And feel free to insert that into your essay. I prefer if you use text wrap and provide a caption for the image. But because this is our first major assignment, try it out. Put an image in there. And if it works, you don't have to. Okay. Another thing with style, I don't have this on the slideshow, but you don't want to use too much passive language. And the passive language is appropriate in lab reports and things where The result is the most important. Try to make things more active by really highlighting the action that got to the result. And another thing with style is that you don't have to use Times New Roman. I mean, everybody loves Times New Roman for an essay. I mean, the student sample that I have up is in Times New Roman. About 95% of them are. It's not that I have a problem with it. It's just we sometimes can break tradition. I am a technical writer, so what I use are always sans serif fonts because sans serif fonts are easier to read. And you can see even on this slide, the sans serif font provides a clean cut line under each of the sentences. So you can see that there's no flourishes on the letters. And it's just actually more accessible and easier to read. So again, not required, but you certainly can change it up with font size. But you will be using MLA format, and there is a resource up for you on that. But the student sample uses MLA format in, it's totally correct. So you can use that as an example as well. Other than that, I don't have anything more to offer in this video, but you can email me and reach out anytime.